Do you remember the days when helmets were optional, fear was unfashionable, and gravity was just a suggestion? When your TV screen was filled with roaring engines, flaming ramps, and a guy named Evel trying to jump over everything, including common sense? Welcome to the 1970s, baby. An era when Daredevils were rock stars, crash landings were part of the show, and pain just part of the paycheck. Buckle up your jumpsuit, fire up your Harley, and then just sit there, because you shouldn't be trying any of these at home. We're launching into the glorious, reckless world of the death-defying stuntmen of the 1970s. Evel Knievel, the king of crash. In the 1970s, television was wild, unpredictable, and dangerously fun. And the king of that era was the one and only Evel Knievel. In the 70s, this man was basically a god. That's how he appeared when you turned on the TV and watched a middle-aged man use a bike to jump over buses. At that time, this was prime time drama. With his star-spangled jumpsuit and a whole lot of swagger, Knievel wasn't just a stuntman. He was a one-man adrenaline show. The man our mom made us promise not to copy, and the one we definitely copied in the backyard. How could we not? Who could forget his ludicrous Snake River Canyon jump in 1974? This lunatic strapped himself into a steam rocket, yes, a rocket, and attempted to leap a 50-mile-long canyon like a patriotic superhero. Sure, the parachute deployed too early, and he crashed, but that stunt made history. If that didn't scare us enough, the very next year, he went to Wembley Stadium, lined up 13 buses, and crashed hard again. This time, he broke his pelvis and told the crowd he was retiring. But like the Terminator, of course, he came back. When he did, he gave us the Kings Island jump. I mean, who else would jump over 14 Greyhound buses, make a clean landing, and do it in front of one of the biggest TV audiences ABC ever saw? Evel Knievel was everywhere. TV, lunchboxes, action figures. I mean, every kid had that wind-up stunt cycle. Most of us broke it recreating jumps in the backyard. But hey, as Knievel said, you're never a failure in life when you fall off a motorcycle. You're only a failure when you don't get back on. But don't get it twisted, it wasn't all glory for this stuntman. Remember 1977 when a jump rehearsal over a tank of sharks broke both his arms? But it wasn't even the crash that ended his career. Nope, it was an assault conviction for attacking a promoter with an aluminum bat. Following the attack, he was rightly jailed, sponsors dropped him, and his finances collapsed. The legend of Evel Knievel, however, endured. Even now, say Daredevil, and Knievel still comes to mind. He was reckless, stubborn, and larger than life. Whether you cheered, winced, or tried your own jump off of a milk crate, you were part of the ride. And if you ever held your breath watching him fly, you know there will never be another like Evel. Debbie Lawler, the flying angel. If you remember Evel Knievel, then you probably also remember Debbie Lawler, the flying angel. This woman was an icon, and she did it in a time when girls were told to stay off the throttle. Born in 1952 in Grants Pass, Oregon, the flying angel was already riding motorcycles by age 9. Coached by her father, who, by the way, was a seasoned racer, Lawler didn't just ride bikes. She revved right past the rulebook. In the macho world of 1970 stunt shows, she showed up with a light blue jumpsuit, pink leather hearts, and the guts to go airborne like no woman had before. Remember February 3rd, 1974? If you don't, let me remind you. The Houston Astrodome was packed. The air was electric. And Debbie Lawler flew 101 feet over 16 Chevrolet trucks. This jump was so crazy, it even beat Evel Knievel's indoor jump record. The crowd went wild. America had its first female stunt superstar, but she was unforgettable for more than that. I mean, her ramp had a giant pink heart painted on it, because why not make history with style? But sadly, being a daredevil came at a cost. A month after her iconic jump at Ontario Motor Speedway, she went for a 140-foot jump over 15 Datsuns. In what can only be described as a heartbreaking tragedy, strong winds threw her off course during the stunt. She crashed and broke 3 vertebrae. It may have looked like the ride was over, but Lawler wasn't going without a fight. Like any legend, she came back after 6 months and did 3 more jumps before hanging up her cape. But Lawler didn't just land jumps. She also landed her own toy line. In 1974, Kenner released the Debbie Lawler Daredevil jump set, which, by the way, was the first action figure of a female athlete. Today, she's remembered in exhibitions like the High Desert Museum's Daredevils, standing proudly alongside Knievel. But more than anything, Debbie Lawler made little girls believe they could fly too. She wasn't just a flying angel, she was proof that wings come in all colors. Eddie Kidd, Britain's Evel Knievel. Born on June 22, 1959 in Islington, London, Kidd was hooked early. Inspired by the 1971 biographical film of none other than Evel Knievel, Kidd began performing bicycle stunts at, get this, 12 years old. As a child, Kidd was jumping over 11 classmates just for fun. By 14, he had turned pro. By 16, he had already flown over 13 double-decker buses at Highbury Stadium. When it comes to kids, all we can say is they don't make them like they used to. At just 19 in 1978, he set a world record by clearing 14 buses and covering a whopping 190 feet. As you would expect, his fame skyrocketed, and Hollywood noticed. He went on to star in 1981's Riding High, where he jumped 80 feet over a viaduct. In 1979's Hanover Street, Kidd pulled off a 120-foot jump as Harrison Ford's stunt double. And in 1993, he outjumped Robbie Knievel in Mississippi, proving he could hang with the best. Sadly, tragedy struck in 1996 during a low-key jump, leaving him paralyzed with brain damage. However, injury aside, his legacy endures to this day. As recently as 2012, he was awarded an OBE for his charity work. That year, he even carried the Olympic torch in the relay leading up to the 2012 London Summer Olympics. Eddie Kidd wasn't just fearless, he was unforgettable. Ken Carter, the Mad Canadian. Ken was a one-man Daredevil show whose life was a mixture of ambition, drama, and just sheer destruction. Born as Kenneth Gordon Polchik in 1938 in Montreal, he dropped out of school to chase danger on four wheels. And after cutting his teeth with traveling stunt crews, Carter went solo, launching cars over everything from broken bridges to burning wrecks across North America. Honestly, this guy seemed more like a movie character than a real person. In 1974, at Islip Speedway in New York, the Mad Canadian somehow hurled a bright red stock car 107 feet over 13 parked vehicles, claiming a world record and making headlines across North America. What made this so mind-blowing was the fact that there were no fancy hydraulics, just a straight shot down a rickety ramp with nothing but pure horsepower and guts. It was the kind of stunt that made kids press their faces to the TV screen and dream of flight. The kind of stunts parents feared. But perhaps what everyone remembers the most about Ken was his dream. A dream to top all dreams. One that sent him to the clouds above. The St. Lawrence River Jump. Between 1976 and 1979, Carter poured his life into building a 1,400-foot ramp near Morrisburg, Ontario, preparing to fly a rocket-powered Lincoln Continental more than a mile across open water. This jump drew so much attention that ABC signed on to broadcast it, and sponsors lined up like a new toy was being released. But year after year, setbacks like weather, mechanical delays, and mismanagement kept grounding his dream. It got worse in 1979 when Carter stepped away briefly and the crew behind his back handed the controls to stuntman Kenny Powers. The car disintegrated midair, and Carter watched his moment get stolen and shattered. But he wasn't done. In 1983, he strapped into a Pontiac Firebird fitted with rocket boosters for one more jump, this time over a pond in Peterborough, Ontario. The crowd held their breath. The car soared through the air and tragically overshot the ramp. Carter died on impact. As heartbreaking as it is that he never got his St. Lawrence moment, he gave us something else. The last great Daredevil myth of the analog age. George Willig, the human fly. George Willig was more than a toy maker with a knack for climbing. This quiet guy with a heart full of daring ambition did the impossible. To put it simply, George Willig was Spider-Man. He wasn't looking for fame, he just wanted to climb, and boy, did he climb. Who can forget what happened on the beautiful spring morning on May 26, 1977? At 6:30 a.m., while most folks were just getting their coffee, George was gearing up for the climb of a lifetime. His target was the South Tower of the World Trade Center, 1,350 feet straight up. Yeah, you heard that right. How did he do it? With a set of custom clamps he designed himself. He latched onto the building's window washing tracks and inched his way up one story at a time. And of course, along the way, the cops showed up. But they took one look at this guy, saw his determination, and figured, he's got this, and let him continue. That's George for you. Quiet, but all business. 3.5 hours later, he reached the top. And what did he get? Well, arrested. But come on, this is New York. And New York being New York, they didn't hit him with that hefty fine. No. They gave him a symbolic fine of $1.10. 1 cent for every story he climbed. A fitting tribute to this guy who made the impossible look easy. Just like that, George became a national sensation, appearing on The Tonight Show and Good Morning America, and later even did some stunt work for iconic TV shows like The $6 Million Man. He even wrote a book about his incredible adventure called Getting It Alone. He was the king of daring, and that climb will never be forgotten. Kitty O'Neil, the fastest woman alive. In every way, Kitty was what legends were made of. Born on March 26, 1946, in Corpus Christi, Texas, Kitty's story is one for the books. See, from a young age, life threw some heavy punches her way, and at just 4 months old, she lost her hearing due to a mix of childhood illnesses. But if you think that slowed her down, you are in for a shock. Her mother, a powerhouse in her own right, taught her to lip read, setting Kitty on a path to become one of the most unstoppable women in history. Fast forward to the 1970s, and Kitty was setting records that made even the bravest men think twice. For example, in 1976, she rocketed across the Oregon-Alford Desert in the SMI Motivator, a hydrogen peroxide-powered, 3-wheeled rocket car, and set the woman's land speed record at an unbelievable 512.710 miles per hour, or 825.127 kilometers per hour. But she didn't stop there. The next year, she took to the water and set the water speed record at 275 miles per hour, or 443 kilometers per hour, in a jet-powered boat named Captain Crazy. She also held a woman's water skiing record and became the first woman to join Hollywood's top stunt agency, Stunts Unlimited. This woman was the definition of woman power. And she wasn't just about speed. She was also a master of high falls, doing 127-foot jumps for Wonder Woman and 180-foot drops from helicopters for the Bionic Woman, as the stunt double for none other than Linda Carter and Lindsay Wagner. Kitty's story did not stop at record-breaking stunts. In 1979, her life was turned into a TV movie, Silent Victory, the Kitty O'Neil story, with Stockard Channing playing her. Kitty O'Neil's legacy as a trailblazer in speed and breaking barriers, in more ways than one, will live on forever. Denny Edwards, the Flying Irishman of Oregon. If you were lucky enough to catch one of Denny Edwards' jumps back in the 1970s, chances are you'd still be talking about it today, because they were just that outrageous. Born and raised in Grand Ronde, Oregon, Denny came from a family where motorcycles weren't just a hobby, they were a way of life. In fact, both his parents rode, and young Denny cut his teeth on flat track racing before shifting gears into full-blown stunt jumping in the early 70s. And like most stuntmen, his spark came from a magazine article on Evel Knievel. And not just any fluff pieces, the one had ramp measurements. That was all Denny needed, because soon enough, he built his own setup and never looked back. He was most often seen flying through the air on his trusty 1963 Triumph 650. Though he occasionally called in his mom's Tiger 100 when he needed something special, like, say, crashing through a flaming wall. It was classic Edwards, fearless, theatrical, and full throttle. Throughout the 1970s, he toured Oregon with a kind of gritty charisma that earned him the nickname the Flying Irishman. He wasn't chasing fame, he was chasing flight, and flight he found hundreds of times over. After hanging up his helmet in 1985, people thought Denny would disappear. But no, he just traded in the roar of a Triumph for the rumble of a truck engine, continuing a career in the trucking industry. Today, his legacy lives on at places like the High Desert Museum, where his beloved 1966 Triumph is on display. He might not have had Knievel's camera crews or national TV deals, but in the Pacific Northwest, Denny Edwards was stunt royalty. Just ask anyone who saw him fly. The 1970s weren't just wild, they were fuel-injected lunacy with a death wish and a camera crew. From Evel's rocket bike insanity to Debbie's sky-high elegance and Ken Carter's doomed dream of airborne glory, these stunt legends didn't just flirt with danger, they married it, lit it on fire, and jumped over it. They broke bones, broke records, and sometimes broke our hearts. But one thing's for sure, when they flew, we believed. So now it's your turn. What legendary stunt made your jaw drop as a kid? Drop it in the comments, and let's toast the fearlessness, the recklessness, and the unforgettable. And hey, if you love digging up the dangerous, the dramatic, and the gloriously unhinged, make sure to like, subscribe, and hit that bell harder than Eddie Kidd landing a 190-foot jump.